So glad that you are here this morning. If you want to join me standing for the first song, and then you can feel free to take whatever posture is comfortable for you. If you want to sit and listen or stand and sing along, whatever works for you this morning. We're just really grateful that you're here. You heard the cry of our hearts, and you came down. Freely you gave us your love. Showing us how. Make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me shine light, and may your love
cause us to
open up,
cause us to
open up our hearts. May your light
cause us to
shine so bright
that we bring
hope into the dark. All that we do without love it means nothing. Grant us the courage to give. As you're calling, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is darkness, let me shine light, and may your love
cause us to
open up,
cause us to
open up our hearts. May your light
cause us to
shine so bright
that we bring
hope into the dark. May your love
cause us to
open up,
cause us to
open up our hearts. May your light
cause us to
shine so bright
that we bring
hope into the dark. Hope for the hopeless, your love is. Strength in our weakness, your love is. May we love as you love. Hope for the hopeless, your love is. Strength in our weakness, your love is. May we love as you love.
May your love cause us to
Open up,
cause us to
open up
our hearts.
May your light cause us to shine so bright
That we bring
hope into the dark. This morning, as a piece of lament, I came across this week a prayer, really a poem from Mary Oliver. So I'd like to read that for us, and then we'll continue on singing in that spirit of lament. This is a poem called Heavy. That time I thought I could not go any closer to grief without dying, I went closer, and I did not die. Surely God had his hand in this, as well as friends. Still I was bent, and my laughter, as the poet said, was nowhere to be found. Then said my friend Daniel, brave even among the lions, it is not the weight you carry, but how you carry it. Books, bricks, grief, it's all in the way you embrace it, balance it, carry it when you cannot and would not put it down. So I went practicing. Have you noticed? Have you heard the laughter that comes now and again out of my startled mouth? How I linger to admire the things of this world that are kind and maybe also troubled. Roses in the wind, the sea geese on the steep waves, a love to which there is no reply. All is not lost, is not lost. 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 The pain of life, I know it well. It knows me well. The road to peace I know is hell. I know it well. All is not lost, is not lost. 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 May the seeds of peace be scattered, birthing trees whose shade gives us rest. May the seeds of peace be scattered, birthing trees whose shade gives us rest. May the seeds of peace be scattered, birthing trees whose shade gives us rest. May the seeds of peace be scattered, birthing trees whose shade gives us rest. I'm struck by these words this morning that sometimes we sing things we know to be true, and sometimes we sing and pray and speak things we long to be true. So for some of us, singing that all is not lost may seem really, really true right now, that we can, like Mary Oliver said, we can admire the things of this world. And for some of us, this may feel like a far off thing that we're longing for. But I'm grateful this morning that the presence of God draws near regardless of where we are at, with feeling settled, with feeling hopeful, or with feeling lost. And so as we sing this next song, would you take a prayerful space with me, a stance just of breathing, of resting, and of hoping with one another. Come be with me, all you who carry heavy burdens. I will give you rest. I will give you rest. Come be with me, all you who carry heavy burdens. I will give give you rest. I will give you rest. Come be with me, all you who carry heavy burdens. I will give you rest. I will give you rest. Come be with me, all you who carry heavy burdens. I will give you rest. I will give you rest. Come be with me, all you who carry heavy burdens. I will give you rest. I will give you rest. You are not possessive. You respect all things. You are not invasive. You have no envy. You are not insistent. You do not force me. You are not controlling. You make me free indeed. You're my deliverer. You're my deliverer. You won't pass me by. You're my deliverer. You're my deliverer. You won't pass me by. Your law is freedom, and mercy is your rule. Though you dwell within me, I can't contain you. You're my deliverer. You're my deliverer. won't pass me by. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. In the ruins of my heart, you preach to the poor, turning over stones to show me there is more. More than all I ask, more than I'm looking for in the ruins of my heart. In the ruins of my heart, you preach to the poor, turning over stones to show me there is more. More than all I ask, more than I'm looking for in the ruins of my heart. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. You're my deliverer, you're my deliverer, you won't pass me by. Jesus, I pray this morning that these words would feel true for us, that you are not an insistent, controlling, demanding God, but that you are a God that partners with us, a God of love, a God of community that guides us and draws near to us. Would we feel that this morning? Would we know that to be true? Thank you that we are able to be gathered here this morning to worship and to listen and to pray and to be still. Amen. You can all be seated.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the unofficial last weekend of summer. I hope you are feeling all of the fall feelings, because I know we are. We're ready for some pumpkin spice and all those other really great apple ciders and everything else. So just want to welcome you here. Thank you, Vince and Haley, for that this morning. Let's give them a hand for just that quiet time of prayer and worship this morning. If you would like to participate in our chat this morning, you can use your phone's camera to follow our QR code, which should be up on the screen. It'll take you to the free app Discord, where there's a lively discussion going on already this morning with our moderator, Ed Wang. He will be hanging out there if you have a comment or question or need anything. And if you are not in the sanctuary this morning, if you want to give a shout out to where you're watching from, that would be awesome. We do want to give a special hello to all of you who are new, either watching us online or here in the auditorium. And I can say, if you're here, please come see me after. I'd love to say hi to you. Love seeing new faces here every Sunday. Brown Line Church is both a local and online community. We are based here in Chicago, but we draw many from beyond Chicago each and every Sunday. This church was started to help people to be able to connect with a God of love, find spiritual health and community, and to contribute to justice and healing in the world. In particular, people who feel more comfortable in culturally progressive settings rather than culturally religious settings. So those are people who maybe didn't grow up in highly religious settings, or people who have chosen to leave those religious environments. Our guide here is simply Jesus. There are religious settings that present faith in Jesus as an exclusive thing that you're either inside or outside of, and that's just not been our experience here. For us, following Jesus has always made us more open and never more closed off. For those of you who have little kiddos this morning, we just want to let you know that our preschoolers and elementary age kids in the church now have an option for their own space together to play a game with friends, to read some stories, share with each other, and do a prayer exercise together. So in the back of the theater, you will see Miss Amanda and Mr. Warren. They're waving their hands. So parents, if your kids would like to join, you can help them make their way to the back of the theater right now, and they'll be brought over to the theater, to Theater 3. So just make sure that we have a phone number for if you are dropping off kids. Just make sure there's a phone number on our roster sheet in case we need to contact you, and they will rejoin us at the end of our service. So with all of that, I'd like to invite Vince up.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate that. And so good to sing with you all this morning and be with you on this Labor Day weekend. Everybody off tomorrow from work? Hopefully everybody who works a 9 to 5 is off tomorrow. That would be nice, right? It's like few days in the year that we all might get off. All right. Well, I am excited to talk today. I'm excited because I've been thinking about what we're going to talk about today for almost a year now, and it's been slow brewing. So I'm going to dive right in, and I hope this is really fun for everybody, and I hope to hear in the chat what further questions you have, because I'm going to sort of set up what we're going to talk about over the next month, okay? So what I want to talk about over the next month is guilt and what to do with guilt. My sense is that nearly everyone has a constant nagging of guilt in the back of their heads at all times. I think everyone does. I think everyone in this culture. I've been thinking about the way that so many lyrics in popular music capture this. So I'm going to give a little kind of look through some music that Vince enjoys. One of the best American albums of the 90s when I was growing up was August and Everything After by the Counting Crows, which is most known for Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, if you remember that song or if you're not familiar with it, it's about two depressed guys at a bar trying to forget that they hate their lives by pretending to be rock stars. And you can in their lyrics, you can hear the self-loathing and the guilt that they haven't done more with their lives hidden behind all of the posturing of the song. So it's, I have some lyrics up here from it. Pass me a bottle, Mr. Jones. Believe in me because I don't believe in anything, and I want to be someone who believes. When everybody loves me, I will never be lonely. Oh, man, this longing, this feeling of, I just haven't done enough with my life, and everybody tells me it. Nearly 30 years later, it feels like, I guess, August and Everything After, I think, came out in 1992 or 3 or something like that. So nearly 30 years later, it feels like guilt is even more pronounced in lyrics. So on her 2017 song, Funeral, Phoebe Bridgers taps into the phenomenon of feeling guilty for feeling sad, or feeling guilty for feeling down or depressed when there are others around you who seem to have far more legitimate reasons to feel down or sad. I wonder if that phenomenon is familiar to anybody. I feel guilty about feeling sad because somebody else they have a right to feel sad, so I can't feel sad, and then you start to guilt trip yourself. Her song Funeral is wishing I was someone else, feeling sorry for myself when I remembered someone's kid is dead. And it's 4 a.m. again, and I'm doing nothing again. I wonder, is that experience familiar? You can't even feel sad because you feel guilty about feeling sad. I wonder what songs or artists are coming to mind for you that express constant nagging guilt in modern life, the constant feeling that you're not doing enough, or that you're not being enough, or that you shouldn't feel what you feel, or that you should be using your time or your resources better. So I've started a list with mine, and a few of us who were setting up today have already added to the list. So I'm going to put our list up here. These are some songs. I've thrown a couple that I already told you about up here, and I'm going to put a QR code up on the screen here. If you would like to add to our list, you can do that in real time, or if you just want to go to a browser on your phone, you can do that too. And you can add to the list here that I've started with, and then maybe before we're done here, I'll go back to the list and we'll see what else people have added. So I'll leave that QR code up. You can go to that if you want to add a song. A couple others that I had put up there that I think are worth going to are Kendrick Lamar released his latest album this year, and the opening track, United in Grief, he raps, shaking and moving like, what am I doing? I'm flipping my time through the Rolodex, indulging myself and my life and my music. The world that I'm in is a cul-de-sac. The world that we in is just menacing. The demons portrayed religionists. I wake in the morning, another appointment. I hope the psychologist listening. Man, first off, I love the made-up word religionist. I just love that wordplay. I think that's got a lot to say. But the cul-de-sac image, right? The world that we live in is a cul-de-sac, just going around and around the guilt loop again and again and again, all of these demands. And I wake up the next morning and there are more demands to feel guilty about. Kendrick Lamar. But this is by no means something recent. I'm doing artists from my childhood, and recently, you thought this was recent. So many, many years before I was born, to me, one of the most right-on expressions of nagging guilt in all of song lyrics comes from Jackson Browne. Jackson Browne originally wrote the song These Days, which has been covered by many people, and it's most famously covered by the Velvet Underground singer Nico. So Jackson Browne isn't really known for this song, but it's his song. He wrote it, and he wrote it when he was very young, and he expressed so much of what I think is just dead on. I've been out walking. I don't do too much talking these days. These days, I seem to think a lot about the things that I forgot to do for you, and all the times I had the chance to. And later he sings, don't confront me with my failures. I have not forgotten them. And I so relate to that last line. Guilt, I don't need to be reminded of the things that I should feel guilty for. I have not forgotten them. They are loud in the back of my head. So I wonder what others have come up with here, if anybody has added anything to our list. And maybe we'll give you another chance to look in a little bit. Oh, yeah, okay, so there's some that were added earlier. The National, nearly every song. I love that. I just think that's dead on if anybody likes The National. But Black by Pearl Jam, yeah, actually anything from grunge, right? Like early 90s music coming out of Seattle, all of it is just guilt, guilt, guilt. Bon Iver, Skinny Love is another good one. Yeah, so feel free to add to our list, folks, if you would like to, because part of me was thinking there were so many good songs that I couldn't even decide. I couldn't even decide what I wanted to bring to you all because there were so many good ones. So if you have any other songs about nagging guilt, I would love to hear them. I mentioned that for about a year, I've been preparing what I want to talk about over the next month. I've been digging into the work of a handful of theologians and sociologists that try to describe the human condition for today, the spiritual crisis for today, those of us who live in a secular society, like, for example, here in Chicago, and how this has changed. The human condition, the spiritual crisis for people has changed dramatically since 500 years ago, when there was far less access and freedom to explore, like there is today, explore new ideas or learn new things. But there was also far less pressure on each individual to make meaning for themselves, because you just kind of did whatever your culture was, right? There was no internet. There wasn't even an option to not believe in God. Everybody just believed in God 500 years ago. So today, our situation is very unique historically. And one of the big insights that I've learned is about guilt, this nagging, constant guilt. For most of human history, the way guilt has shown up is people feel guilty before God, right? You know, many of the Psalms really beautifully capture this, feeling guilty before God. Psalm 32 in the Bible says, I said I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin, God. Or Psalm 51, against you and you only, God, have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. And there's really beautiful psalms about experiencing forgiveness from this feeling of guilt before God that so many have struggled with over the ages. That's the traditional discussion in religion about what do we do with guilt? How do we have to get right with God somehow because we all feel guilty before this holy God. For those of you who have spent a good deal in churches in your life, you've probably heard lots of sermons on how to get right with God, huh? Or, you know, if you feel guilty before God, here is what to do with that. Let me give you the few steps to address that problem. But what I want to suggest is that today, in our secular context, guilt before God is sometimes a thing, and in certain circumstances, I think is really important to talk about. But because day-to-day life now is so secular, it's so disenchanted and focused on what's right in front of us, not focused on the transcendent, there isn't this backdrop of, am I okay with God, for most people in our culture. And yet, what about all this music we make? Guilt is by no means gone, right? We feel guilt all the time. But I think the predominant experience of guilt is different now. We don't often feel guilt before God. We feel guilt before ourselves. This is the predominant experience of guilt today. It is us letting ourselves off the hook that we have such a hard time with. I cannot let myself off the hook. I feel guilty to myself, before myself. And I want to call this new guilt, okay? This is the new hotness in the world of guilt. Old guilt, get out of here. We got new guilt. Feel guilty before ourselves. It's interesting. Guilt has migrated. It moved its office. From God pointing the finger at us, that's what we constantly feel guilty about as human beings, to us pointing the finger at ourselves. That is what drives us mad. Arguably, new guilt is more diabolical, because as much as I regard it as progress to move away from a view of God that is like finger pointing, at least that outsources the guilt trip, right? When we're guilty before ourselves, we guilt trip ourselves. There is no escape from the guilt. We are judge, jury, and executioner of our own trial. So it's arguably harder this way, what we experience. One of the sociologists I've been reading is a German thinker by the name of Hartmut Rosa. If you want some boring reads that are actually really fascinating for people like me, you can read Hartmut Rosa. And Hartmut Rosa helps me understand, from a head perspective, this new guilt reality that I think we see expressed from a heart perspective so much in song lyrics. Rosa calls the condition of the modern world time sickness. Time sickness. We are all time sick. He says that the 21st century life is in constant acceleration, and that's why we feel time sick, because everything is speeding up. Not just everything's fast, everything is getting even faster. It's accelerating technologically, socially, and just the regular pace of life that we live at. The way we experience all of this speeding up is we constantly feel guilty that we are wasting our time or that we are not using our time well enough. That's what it means to be time sick. Oh, I'm so time sick. I don't have enough time. I should be doing all of these things, right? If I used my time better, I'd be in less debt. If I used my time better, I'd be more informed about racism or the war in Ukraine. Do you guys remember there's still a war going on? Oh, shoot, I forgot. Oh, God. I feel so guilty, right? If I had more time, if I used my time better, I'd have made that failed relationship work. I just needed more time, but there's not enough time. I'd be a better parent. I'd be a better sibling. I'd be more present to that person in suffering, and I wouldn't feel bad about it like that Phoebe Bridgers song. Oh, does this feel familiar? Those kind of feelings? We are all time sick, Rosa says. Acceleration, this constant speeding up of life, insists that a good life meets the demands of a few things. Availability. If you're not taking advantage of everything available to you, you feel guilty. You bought that book and you didn't read it. Oh, turn the knife, right? You have the aluminum straws in your backpack, but you still ask for straws at Starbucks. Oh, such a terrible person. Accessibility is another thing we have to meet the demand of. If you do not keep up with all the right virtue signaling to ensure that you are accessible to your in-group, to ensure that you are beyond reproach, you feel guilty, but you're scared to admit it, because if you admit it, then it's like, oh man, I wasn't cool enough to know that, oh, we're not supposed to say that anymore. Oh my gosh, oh, but I can't tell anybody because I'd feel guilty if I said it. We feel guilty when we don't meet the demands of attainability. If others have attained something and you haven't, you feel guilty. Hello, social media, right? I struggle with this so much in my world. Shouldn't my church be able to serve these people and these people this way and this people this way? Other churches can do it. I feel guilty. My church is so crap. Do you guys think my church is crap? See, there we go. I'm looking for validation because I feel so guilty, right? Yeah. Because our culture of acceleration defines the good life as meeting these kinds of demands, it is a breeding ground for guilt. There is maybe no way to live in this culture and not feel guilty before ourselves all the time. It's maybe just a feature of this life. It just is, it's going to be there. You know what that means is it's not your fault. You're not bad if you feel guilty because it's a part of our culture. There are wonderful things about the age and the culture that we live in, but also every culture comes with its unique challenges, and this is one for us. Experiencing a constant nagging guilt that we are wasting our time is just a feature of modern secular culture because we are conscious of everything instantly, right? We pull out our phones and every horrible thing that there might be able to be, we might be able to feel bad about, we can know about. And so there's another chance to feel bad. Every possible thing we could do but didn't do is clear to us because we can look at everybody else's, the highlights of their lives on Instagram and immediately feel like, oh, I should have done it that way. Do you guys feel buried? This sucks, right? We're just guilty all the time. So the traditional religious discussion of guilt, as I mentioned, discussing guilt before God, the antidote is forgiveness. God forgave the guilt of my sin is Psalm 32's crescendo. And I think forgiveness as an antidote to guilt is brilliance that still stands. It's just that in our context of guilt before ourselves, generally speaking, we're not racking our brains for how do we be forgiven by God. We are racking our brains for how do we forgive ourselves. And this is a topic that is bursting at the seams in the book and podcast world. There's so many ideas out there, and many really good ones, and many really crappy ones, about how to forgive yourself. Because we all feel this. We need to learn how to forgive ourselves. And I want to talk today because I think that the God that Jesus taught us about is such an ally in this. And I think that even though we don't struggle as much, generally speaking, with guilt before God, we struggle with guilt before ourselves, I think there is no less need for God in our situation. It's just a different need for God. So maybe the Jesus saying for our time, I'm gonna make a bold statement. I think this is the Jesus saying for our time is Matthew 11, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This is what we sang this morning. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Everything in modern life puts more demands on us. It weighs us down more, makes us more conscious of the things we are not already doing. Some of it is false guilt. I to this day do not know why I feel so guilty if I ignore that email marketer. Why do I feel so much, why do I need to respond nicely to the email marketer, right? I don't know why I do that. That's false guilt, right? But that's a part of our culture. But some of it, honestly, a lot of the demands that we're talking about that are all around us all the time are for really worthy things. Like I actually really am. I'm joking about straws and aluminum straws and Starbucks cups, but I really am coming to terms with the way my consumption habits contribute to the world's climate crisis. I'm really trying to take that seriously. I'm really trying to learn about that, and it's appropriate for me to feel guilty, right? So not all of this is just false guilt. I think a lot of the things that we have flying around us, these demands that are shouting at us, they're legit. But the challenge is that we are buried by them at all times. And it's so difficult to discern between the false guilt and the worthy guilt. So what if the reason we need God in the age of new guilt is because God can be the one thing in life that isn't heaping more demands on us, but promises instead to help us filter all of those demands? What if Jesus' statement in Matthew 11 is like, that's who God is, O modern world that's always guilty. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. I am going to be unlike everything else in modern life that heaps demands on you, and I will be the one thing that tries to help you filter those demands. Because my burden, my yoke, God says, is appropriate in weight. It's not too heavy and it's not too light. God can strain away all that we need not carry. God can speak gently to us. I see your heart, your longing to live more according to your values, and your disappointment that you failed to do so, and you can forgive yourself. Has anyone ever spoken that to you before? I've had something like that spoken to me in therapy before by another human being. I've had it in some of my closest relationships. And I've had it in prayer before. I see your longing to live more according to your values and that you're disappointed in your failures. You can forgive yourself. That is what we need to hear in the age of new guilt. So God as a filter is a constant part of my prayer life, and it helps me with my personal experience of nagging guilt. You know, what is mine to carry right now? God, what are you encouraging me to forgive myself for? And the way it looks is I quiet myself. I've talked before that usually for me, this is in the morning. I like to get up before everybody else in my house. But also, I kind of suck at doing this in the middle of the day. Some people are really good at like carving out like 10 minutes in between meetings to like, I'm going to slow down. And man, I mean, I know that helps them so much during their day because it's actually in the middle of the cruff. I'm not very good at that. I'm trying to get better at that. So in the morning for me, I'm usually doing this. But I quiet myself. I try to listen internally. The image that I love that describes this kind of listening prayer is a flashlight shining in the vastness that is my mind space. Like, as though my mind space is like too big for me to even understand myself. It's unwieldy, right? But there's a flashlight shining, and that is God trying to highlight different things. Hey, you should carry that. Don't carry that. Leave that in the corner. You know, that's false guilt. That's legit, but you can forgive yourself. You know, I look for the flashlight. And over time, praying this way teaches you a few things. It teaches you to see God the way Jesus did, as fundamentally a burden reliever, not a burden adder. I need all of you who have spent lots of times in highly religious settings to hear that again. God fundamentally, according to Jesus, is a burden reliever, not a burden adder. Life will give you plenty of burdens. Don't worry, you're not going to be irresponsible. You will have lots of burdens in front of you. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, not all you who are not doing enough so I can give you more things to do. So praying this way can teach us to see God the way Jesus did. It can also help us see ourselves as worthy of being forgiven for not carrying everything, for not keeping up with every demand of modern life, even the very important ones. when I fail at something that's actually legitimately important to me or I'm trying to be better at, and I beat myself up about it, do I stay there? Do I get stuck there? Does it affect the next moment in my life? Am I mean to my kids afterwards? If all of that's happening, I'm not forgiving myself. And I need to forgive myself. God, praying this way can help us see ourselves as worthy of having that experience. We're not bad if we have to have that experience of forgiving ourselves. It can also, I want to say, praying this way, help you see what your priorities are right now. Like, I think that the key thing in all of this, Jesus saying, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, is Jesus does give us a different yoke, but it's a yoke that's appropriate. It's a yoke that's not too heavy and not too light. And I think praying this way, truly opening yourself up to an encounter with a God who isn't made in your own image, will not make you less reliable. It will not make you less responsible. This is not a get out of jail free card every time you don't want to do something. Or, as a millennial, I have heard all of the stereotypes of like, well, you can just make your own rules because you're a millennial. I've heard all of those things. This is not what we're talking about. This is like, when you pray and truly open yourself up to a God who is not made in your own image, and you're saying, God, filter all of these demands that are coming at me because that's what it means to live and be alive in the 21st century, you don't become like a person who does nothing. You become a person who truly knows what your priorities are. That's amazing. When I have days where I'm settled in my priorities, when I'm able to say no without feeling buried by guilt, and when I'm able to say yes without feeling overly burdened, those are my best days, man. It would be awesome to have more days like that. But we are not weak when we have to do this again and again and again, because remember, guilt is a core feature of our culture. There is no escaping it. It's not you. It's all of this. And so this is just a part of our, we have to learn to do this. If we don't learn to do this, and nobody else is teaching us to forgive ourselves, we will continue to feel that constant nagging guilt in the back of our heads. This is the spiritual crisis for the 21st century. I'm convinced. One last story I want to tell. So because historically, new guilt is new. See what I did there? That's why I call it new guilt. That's terrible. Sorry. You guys, you're ready for the next person. Get the hook. Because historically, new guilt is new, churches really only know how to speak to old guilt in general. They really only know how to foster conversations about guilt before God. We're not as experienced, churches, as talking about guilt before ourselves. But I believe pastors like me and churches like ours have a responsibility to learn, to understand, and to speak to new guilt. And that need is in some ways actually quite pressing and has high stakes. Let me go back to music again. In February 2018, I went with two friends to Thalia Hall here in Chicago to see one of my favorite bands, Frightened Rabbit. These are Scottish indie rockers who play really like turn up loud in the car music. It's super fun. If you feel mad, listen to Frightened Rabbit. They combine like really easy to love guitar riffs, vocal harmonies, and heartbreaking lyrics. I cannot necessarily recommend Frightened Rabbit because they are not for everyone. So let me be clear right at the start. You may not like Frightened Rabbit, and you may be very offended that I do. They are filthy and unfiltered and irreverent to the maximum power, so it is totally fine if you do not like them. But what comes with those qualities that they have is that they are raw and emotional and often very beautiful. It's clear that their frontman, Scott Hutchinson, has been burned by churches. So many of his lyrics are blistering, totally unflinching takedowns of bad religion. And honestly, I cheer him on for all of it. Sometimes he is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and that is totally fair. So it's hard to listen to sometimes. But it feels worth it for me to cheer him on because what comes with his lack of filter is often incredibly insightful things that I would argue are actually very Jesus-y. He just would be shocked if somebody said that to him. So I was so excited to see Frightened Rabbit. This is February 2018. It was an amazing show. They only didn't play one of my favorite songs, but it's like a deep cut, so I understood. Less than 3 months after my friends and I saw them that night, Scott Hutchinson disappeared. And the Twitter account for Frightened Rabbit asked everyone for help. Please, if you've seen Scott, our lead singer, if you know of anything, please let us know. So this was not a joke. This was real. He was found some days later, having taken his own life. And it was a shock, of course, but not altogether a surprise, as he had been known to have struggled with mental health and suicidal thoughts before. One of Scott's songs that had always spoken to me, because I'm a pastor, and it so explicitly spoke to bad religion, and I was like, yeah, you go, you take down bad religion. I'm here to pitch something better. It's a song that they played that night, and it's called Holy. And it has lines like, save me the fake benevolence, I don't have time. I don't mind being lonely, so spare me the brimstone. He does a lot of wordplay in the song, contrasting being holy, like holier than thou, condescending, posturing. Contrasting that with being full of holes is his line, right? That wordplay. Actually alive, humble, honest with oneself is what he's getting at when he says full of holes. And he says, I don't mind being lonely, so leave me alone. Are you oh so holy that I'll never be good enough? Don't care if I'm lonely, because it feels like home. I won't ever be holy. Thank God I'm full of holes, full of holes. Can you hear all the old guilt tripping that Scott has heard leveled at him behind these lyrics? You can basically hear someone yelling at him, you are guilty before God. You need God's forgiveness. Can you hear it all behind those lyrics, right? And Scott's response is like, if that's the case, I don't mind being lonely. Spare me the fake benevolence, y'all. And I think he's just being clever when he uses the term thank God in the last line. Isn't that interesting? That he uses the term, thank God I'm full of holes. I think he's just being clever with that, like just kind of trying to take down being holy. But like I said, he doesn't realize how truly Jesus-y he is. I think it's Jesus who would say, woe to those who present themselves as holy, and blessed are those who are full of holes. That's what I think Jesus would say. In the latest few years since Scott's death, I listen to that song now, and sometimes I just cry. I listened to it this week, preparing for this talk, and I just cried a little bit. If only religious authorities around Scott could have seen that there is a lot of Jesus in Scott's life. You know, there was no need to preach at Scott telling him that he needed help he couldn't give himself. Scott already knew that. What's his identification? I'm full of holes, man. I'm not trying to posture. He didn't need to be told that. But that insight wasn't acknowledged by religious authorities in his life because it showed up in a different way than we are used to in church settings. It showed up as new guilt rather than old guilt. And so it seems Scott had forced down his throat the wrong message for the wrong time, and it just compounded his guilt. What I'm getting at is that in some cases, like Scott's, but also I think countless other cases that are less extreme, but really still very hurtful, if your predicament is guilt before yourself, like we're talking about today, but you've had preached at you mercilessly guilt before God, it might drive you mad. Because you already feel guilty enough. And churches and religious authorities today must learn to help people find God from the place of new guilt. Because this is the world we live in now. There's no less need for the help that we can't give ourselves. No less need for God, for transcendence, for help that, like, truly, if I try to forgive myself, I'm not going to be able to do it. I need help. I need help to forgive myself. There is no less need for that. But forcing people into the traditional religious discussion of you need forgiveness before God is at best missing the point, and at worst, I think it can contribute to the worst sort of mental health outcomes, as perhaps we saw in Scott Hutchinson's case. I don't know, of course, right? I'm guessing from the outside. But I don't think I'm far off when I read his lyrics. I wish I could have known Scott personally and showed him a different picture of faith. Showed him how he was actually much closer to faith than he thought. And that is a call before us if we're going to help people with the constant nagging guilt as a church. We've got to help people with guilt before themselves. We've got to really understand what that means. And what does it mean to find God as your ally in that struggle, in that fight? Well, I want to pray for us. Does that sound good? I told you at the start, I kind of got going, and I didn't look at my chat here, but I told you I wanted you all to put things in the chat. So I'm promising today to look at the chat this week as we continue to talk about guilt over the next 3 Sundays. Next week we kind of slated for a more like Q&A approach to guilt. We have a couple things we want to say, but we also want to just address what was said. So if you've put something in the chat, awesome, thank you for that. If you still have something else that like, what's the next thing here? Or I have more questions about this. Put them in the chat. Put them in the chat this week. Put them in Discord because we'll tailor next Sunday to what we've learned this week in Discord. Let me pray. Let me kind of generally kind of bring us into a prayerful space. But what I want to spend the most time in as we're praying, maybe you feel like you need this, is I'm going to lead us in a spiritual practice of forgiving ourselves. Okay? All right. You can get in a comfortable position here. If you want to close your eyes, you can do that, but you don't have to. I often sometimes just want to like focus on something in the distance, and so my eyes are not distracted. You can do that too. God, you are perfectly wise and loving, and you show us through Jesus that your yoke is the appropriate weight. It's not too heavy, and it's not too light. And your promise to each of us is to give us rest, not more burden. God, you see vividly our experience. In every age, in every culture, in every country, in every group of people that has ever sought you, you've seen their unique predicaments, and you see ours. We are exhausted with time sickness, and we feel guilty all the time. And I don't even know what guilt is appropriate and what guilt is false, because there's so much of it. But you see us, God. Help us in this moment to attune our attention to you and feel seen by you, God, right now. As we are paying attention to what's going on inside us, we ask that you would give us a sense of your Spirit with each of us, looking at us in the eyes and saying, you can forgive yourself. You can forgive yourself. And if it helps you in this moment, you don't have to do this, but if it helps you in this moment, I'm going to encourage us to do something we probably wouldn't normally do. I'm going to encourage you to actually pray out loud with me. If you would like to, I just want to repeat those words over ourselves. I can forgive myself. And if that feels helpful to you to speak out loud in this space, you are totally welcome to do that. Or if you'd rather just do that under your breath or in your mind, you can totally do that too. Join me here. I can forgive myself. I can forgive myself. I can forgive myself. And one more time. I can forgive myself. God, speak gently to us by your Spirit. See our hearts and our longings to live more according to our values. See our disappointment that we have failed and speak to us that we can forgive ourselves. Help us to discern what are the right things for us to carry and to filter out what are the things that we can forgive ourselves for so that we do not implode, so that we do not bend and buckle under the pressure of doing life in the 21st century. We long to be able to be helpful in the ways we're meant to be helpful, but not overburdened while doing so. What does that look like? What does that look like for us today? And remind us, God, that when we have to do it tomorrow, it's not because we're bad. It's because this is all around us. This is the world we live in. But you can help us navigate it. We receive you, God, as the voice that can help us navigate that constant nagging guilt. In Jesus' name, amen. Whew. All right. I hope this feels like a journey worth taking to everybody in our church over the next month. I really do want to hear, where do we go next from here if I've set the table for us over the next 3 Sundays? So again, use Discord to do that. Let me mention, as we do every Sunday, that if you are new or newer with us, as you've joined today here at the theater, or if you're joining us online, one of the best ways to keep in touch with Brownline or to stay connected with what we're doing here is to get on our contact list. So we're going to put a QR code up on the screen that you can follow, whether you're watching online or here in the theater. Just pull out your phone and follow that. And what you can do is let us know your contact info. We'll follow up with you so we can get together either in person or over Zoom, hear how we can best serve you and how we can help you connect with other human beings at this church and not just with cool ideas at this church. That's one of the major things that helps people really feel like a church is home, is actual connection with other people. So we would love to do that for you. You can visit our website to learn what's upcoming in terms of our calendar. You can follow us on social to find out what's upcoming at Brownline Church, or you can join our church's private Discord server, which is what we were using for our chat today. I will mention a quick financial update, and we'll put that up on the screen just to see how we've done over the last several months. We mention every week that our church is crowdfunded, so everything that we're able to do financially is people who believe in the vision of this church just setting aside money and giving on a regular basis. That's the vast majority of our budget. We don't receive any larger grants or wider organizations don't back us with money, so it's all kind of homegrown here. So if you believe in the vision of this church, we would love for you to give. This is how we keep the lights on here at the Davis Theater. Very bright lights shining right on top of me, and pay our bills for the pastors. So, what is my announcement for this week? Oh, we have a fun announcement. Haley, can you join me up here for announcement? Because you're gonna lead us in communion in a second. But maybe you can tell everybody, we're gonna put a QR code up on the screen, another one here, if you want to participate in this. This will also be shared multiple times over the course of the next several weeks. But it is a chance to fill out a form and tell us what are your texts of terror. And we're kind of being silly because October is the month of Halloween and spooky. So what are the biblical texts of terror, the biblical texts that have been used to terrorize you or that you've witnessed terrorize other people? And we want to, in the month of October, we want to dig into these and see what we can redeem. And Haley's going to kind of lead this. Am I giving a good, do you want to say anything more about it? No, is that pretty good? Okay. So you can follow this and you can tell us what your text of terror is. It's not the last chance you'll get. We'll mention it again, but that's also available. I'm going to pass it to Haley, who's going to close us with communion.
So each week we close our time with the practice of communion. And I've actually been thinking about communion a lot lately. So if anyone wants to have a theological conversation about communion, sign me up. But for some of us, this ritual is just the time at the end of the service where you get to make awkward small talk with people in the theater and say hey to some friends. That's the best. And for some of us, Communion actually holds some really deep theological meaning that maybe you've picked up in this setting or maybe you've held on to from other religious settings. But the beauty of rituals is that regardless of meaning, they're done over and over again and they can mark time for us. And it's this rhythm that helps carry us when the meaning is a little bit harder to come by. And so, to honor the communal aspect of communion, it's almost like we're sharing a meal together. You'll need something to eat and something to drink. So, if you're in the theater, we're going to be passing crackers around in just a moment, and you can use whatever beverage you've got around you. And if you're joining from home, you can grab your own communion elements. But as we take this together, it's a symbol of our need to be nourished by something beyond ourselves, a need for community, a need for God to guide us and to be with us, to sustain us and to offer us hope, that we acknowledge the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus in this practice. So I'm going to invite you to stand up if you're in the theater, and we'll pass around some crackers. You can chat with someone nearby. We've got a little conversation starter for our question today, which if you want to put it on the screen because I don't remember it. Yes, a band or artist that really speaks to you. So you can share some band or artist that you really enjoy listening to. And we will come back together and pray over the elements to take them together. All right, so if we can come back together to take communion with one another. And if you would join me in prayer. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he shared a meal with his community, and he broke bread, gave thanks, and said, "This is my body broken." Likewise, he took the cup and said, "This is my blood poured out. Drink of this in remembrance of me." And so, Jesus, we remember this morning, we try to remember that you are a burden reliever, not a burden adder. Would you be with us on this continued journey of self-forgiveness? Would we notice the ways that our inner conversations, our inner dialogue could shift and change to be more forgiving and more gracious, both toward ourselves and toward others we encounter? Thank you for the gift of community and that we don't do this work by ourselves. Amen. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next week in the Davis and online. Hi, Jenny.